דיוויד, הייתי רוצה לשאול אותך לגבי נקודה שלא עלתה כאן, דווקא בגלל הזווית הראייה שלך של הזירה הבינלאומית, והיא בקעת הירדן. האם ניתן, ראיתי את המפות שהצגת של ה-4.4%, של ה-2.2%, אבל האם ניתן באמת, לאור מה שקורה היום, מאיראן דרך סוריה, מה שכנראה יקרה בעיראק, בכל הסביבה שמסביבנו, האם ניתן באמת להבטיח גבולות ברי הגנה למדינת ישראל, מבלי שצה"ל ישב בבקעת הירדן?
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'll do this. It's okay. Hello. Okay. Good question. I think, look, I had this discussion with Abbas in his office about this, saying, I understand your narrative is about land. The Jews also have a narrative, and it's about acceptance. They got out of Gaza. They got out of Lebanon. They felt they got rockets. So if they didn't like the book in Gaza, they don't want to see the movie in the West Bank, basically. And I think there's an understanding of that. I said, land for rockets, that is just not going to work. And you have to understand how the other side sees it too. Just as you want people to sympathize with the Palestinian side. And I believe that when it comes to a presence on the Jordan River, as Prime Minister said, there's an understanding, which maybe they don't announce, but I believe they understand Israel is not leaving there so soon. Now, will there be creative, on how you do it? I think so, but I do think that no one is expecting Israel to leave the Jordan River right away. I just wonder if I could just say very quickly, I think Carolyn's idea is very interesting about a binational state that a lot of Palestinians will like. She might be right, it's not 6 million versus 5 million, but 6 million versus 4 million if you add Israeli Arabs. But I think a lot of people wonder, can Israel be a Jewish state with that sort of a ratio? Even if you think the ratio is cutting in your favor, 6-5 or 6-4. I think it's really an open question. Naftali might be right about Madonna, and that the world will forget. But I just want to say something. A lot of people talk about American campuses. I go to American campuses. I've done 52 campuses in the last 3 years. A lot of the things what is said about the campus here in Israel is wrong. The good news, it isn't burning down. But the bad news is we're losing Jewish students. And at the Hillels, at some of them, not all of them, when they asked me to speak, because they know I'm sympathetic to Israel, they said, we want you, but we just don't want to use the word Israel anymore in flyers because it's a turn-off word. This is Jewish students, Hillels. Not all of them, not the national office, and they're excellent people, but I'm just saying is that people don't give press conferences. They just kind of melt away. And I see it. I see it going across the United States. I'm worried about it. I was at Columbia, and I want to make sure no one says I'm doing a moral equivalence. Don't leave this room thinking I said that. I was there during the anti-apartheid movement on South Africa, and I see how a country was destroyed through economic boycotts. And God forbid that should happen to this country. I believe in the resilience of the people of Israel, that its will to live is greater than its enemies' will to die. But don't just think this is about a weekend of a Madonna concert of ritual condemnation. This is really, really serious. And the more the Palestinians focus on nonviolence, frankly, the more serious it is, not less serious it is. So this is something, if you only look at 2012 people, you're only looking at a tip of an iceberg. And this is what I think is concerning. I don't think it has to be a third intifada. I don't think we need an international confrontation this way. But I think Israel's security arrangements need to be preserved. Israel has very good rights on this. They have a very strong case, and I think it's possible. The differences are not as wide as people think. That's all.
מי מעביר את המיקרופונים? הנה, שם. בבקשה, שם. שם. אם אפשר גם שאלות קצרות, ולא בפורמט של שאלה ולא בפורמט של נאום.
I'll try to keep it short. Basically, my question is mainly to Naftali Bennett and Caroline Glick. My question is incoherent to the international law. In short-term future and not long-term future, right now these areas are considered war turfs, and that's why I'm asking, how would Saul abilities and our abilities will be still as they are today and still be coherent with our international law obligation. And I still want to refer, especially for you, Naftali, I think obligation should be respected, none of the less if you get sanctions or not. And what do you think about that?
International law. Judea and Samaria, the last effective legal status was in 1920 San Remo Conference, where it was assigned to be part of the Jewish homeland, by the way, also east of the Jordan River. Bottom line, yes, those areas today are disputed areas. Disputed. There never was a Palestinian state, just to remind everyone. So when you say that we conquered it from a Palestinian state, show me the state that it never existed. We conquered it. Let's just get the facts straight. We took it and freed it from an illegal Jordanian occupation. That's what happened. So it's, if you will, a vacuum, no man's land from a legal standpoint. So if we apply our law, and I differ from Caroline on one thing. I think we should apply Israeli law only on the Israeli-controlled areas where there's 360,000 Israelis and 48,000 Arabs, and grant them citizenship. So there's nothing of the sort of apartheid. The rest of the area where there's 1.8 million Palestinians, they govern themselves. So, yeah, we apply law, and we stand strong behind it. Just one point regarding the campuses. I'm very cognizant of what's going on in the world. I ran a big business that was global, and I'll say this. First of all, I prefer that my 7-year-old Yoni will live than Makovsky will be offered a lecture in the university, A. B, I think Israel's profound mistake is the following, including Netanyahu. He goes out and says, we need the land because of security, and the Palestinians say it's ours. Of course we're going to lose. With all due respect to your security, if the world buys in that this land is theirs, so we're wrong. But the land is ours. It's our homeland. And that's the fundamental truth that we forgot. If we start, and this will take time, maybe 10 years, maybe 50, maybe 100, but the land of Israel is ours.
I'm not going to dignify that with a response about the university. But I think the key issue is the binational state. I think actually Carol, of the two, I actually think her position is intellectually more coherent because she says, yeah, give them the vote. The question is you're going to be able to be a Jewish state if you're a binational state? That to me is the question. Yeah.
Okay,
well, you know, it works, okay. So David asked me a question, and the answer is yes, it will be a Jewish state. It's important. Again, I feel like, you know, all the people who are talking to us about, oh, we're just going to expel, you know, 68,000, 75,000, 130,000 people from their homes simply because they're Jewish, and the other side hates Jews so much that they want a Jew-free state, are missing the point, right? What are you talking about building? You're talking about building a racist state that says, not one Jew here, not one Jew here. We're not going to allow any Jews to live in our country. What sort of racket is this? It just has to stop. This is nonsense. And the whole notion that we have to say that we also have to have a tiny, tiny minority of Muslims in order to assert our rights as Jews to our land is ridiculous. And it's not just here among people who are calling for or say that you have to call into question Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. If Jews remain a majority here, it's all over the world. It's in places like France. Can France assert its sovereignty when it has a 10% Muslim minority? And again, the answer is yes. That liberal democracy is based upon the concept not of communal rights, but of individual rights. And we have to recognize that. And we have to say the numbers speak for themselves. We are not counting people as members of community. We are counting people as individuals. And when the Jews have the majority, of course, we have the right to determine that the nature of this country is a Jewish one. Of course we can, and of course we will continue to do so.
עוד שאלה, בבקשה.
יש לי הרבה מה להגיד, אבל אני אצמצם את זה לשאלה אחת, ובשביל השאלה הזאת אני רוצה שאם מר בנט ומיס גליק תוכלו לשים בצד רגע את נושא שאלת המשפט הבינלאומי ואת הגבולות, ותענו לי כציונים, יהודים, ישראלים, שדואגים לפיתוחה של הארץ, איך אתם מסוגלים בשנת 2012 לדבר על סטטוס קוו שכולל כיבוש של עם אחר, אם לא תרצו עם אחר, חברה, קהילה אתנית מסוימת בשנת 2012. תודה.
אז אילן, אני מאפשר לך הערה קצרה, ואחר כך תעביר להם את המיקרופון.
אני רוצה להתייחס לשני נושאים. הנושא הראשון זה סוגיית בקעת הירדן וגבולות ברי הגנה. תראו, השיעור הראשון שמלמדים חייל או קצין בצה"ל, כשמדברים על ניהול מלחמה, זה לא להכניס עצמו לשטח נחות, שאנחנו קוראים לו שטח הריגה. בקעת הירדן היא שטח הריגה, ולא היה לי טנק אחד והייתי נדרש להגן על בקעת הירדן, הוא לא היה נמצא בבקעת הירדן, זה המקום האחרון שאפשר לשים אותו. וישראל כנגד מתקפה ממזרח, שטח ההריגה שלה הוא בכלל במזרח ירדן, ואוי ואבוי לנו עם טנק אחד, לא משנה של מי, איראני, עיראקי או אחר, יגיע בכלל לבקעת הירדן. והדבר השני, זה לסיכום דבריי, כי אני מניח שאין כאן סיכומים. אני רוצה לשאול 3 שאלות שאין לי עליהן תשובות, מאוד קצרות. השאלה הראשונה היא, מהן גבולות היכולת של ממשלה ישראלית מבחינה פוליטית? האם יש ממשלה ישראלית שיכולה להחליט על פינוי של כל כך הרבה מתיישבים? אין לי על זה תשובה. השאלה השנייה היא, האם צה"ל, במידה ויקבל תשובה לפנות 100,000 מתנחלים, האם הוא יוכל היום לבצע את המשימה הזאת? לפני 6 שנים הייתה לי תשובה ברורה והתשובה הייתה כן, היום אני כבר לא יודע מה התשובה. והשאלה השלישית היא, האם יש לנו בכלל אופציה אחרת? כי הרי אנחנו לא נהיה מיעוט בארצנו, כי הרי אנחנו לא ניצור מצב של אפרטהייד במדינת ישראל, והרי אנחנו לא יכולים להנציח את המציאות הביטחונית הנוכחית ל10-20 שנה הקרובות, ואם כך אין לנו ברירה אלא לנהל משא ומתן על חלוקת הארץ לשני עמים. תודה.
נפתלי, תענה אתה לשאלה הזאת.
Two points. In 2002 Passover, I was in Florida with friends, and there was a massacre in Netanya where 30 Israelis were slaughtered by a terrorist, and I had to come back. I came back on the first plane to clean up the mess that was created. Imagine an architect builds a bridge and it collapses, and 1,600 people die because of that collapse. Will you let those architects build now another bridge? There was a notion of Oslo. Everything was planned. The maps were beautiful. It was perfect. When it collapsed, I came back to fight, and I'll do it again and again. And my friends died to clean up the mess. That I want to be clear, the intentions were good, and Elon's intentions are good, but people plan and God laughs. So we have to be very cautious. To the question about כיבוש, אני אעבור לעברית. שאלה נשאלה בעברית, אני אענה בעברית. השאלה הייתה, איך אני חי עם כיבוש של פלסטינים? אני אגיד את זה בצורה מאוד ברורה. אם אני גר בבית ואני מורחק בכוח מהבית, והבית הזה זה ארץ ישראל, ואז בינתיים נכנסים ערבים וחיים בבית שלי, ואני חוזר הביתה, זה לא כיבוש. אתה לא יכול לכבוש את הבית שלך. המהות הבסיסית היא של מי הארץ הזאת. כן, מהות מוסרית, היסטורית, לאומית. עכשיו, אני ער לכך שחיים פה ערבים, ולכן הצעתי תוכנית שאין בה כיבוש, יש בה הפרדה, הפרדה ריבונית. אבל זאת הארץ שלנו, ומי שלא מאמין בזה, משתמש במילה הלא נכונה, כיבוש.
I would, hello. I would like to ask Caroline Glick, seeing as we have a country that's fairly difficult to govern with a significant Jewish majority, even if there are only 1 million Arabs added to the 1 million Arabs already here, I think the country would be far more difficult to govern, and I'm not sure how you would feel about that. And I think it would also, and I would like to have your reaction, add to the anti-Zionist, non-Zionist growing majority in our parliament.
Okay, so I think that the issue of governability or non-governability of Israel has something to do with the problem of non-enforcement of the laws by the government. And we have weak politicians, we've had weak political leadership for a long time, and we still do. I think that we have to recognize that a lot of the sense of ungovernability of Israel has to do with the fact that we are captive to our fears, that we think that if we apply the law without prejudice to all citizens of Israel, whether it relates to just regular crime, to tax evasion, or to taking over government lands without seizing government lands and building illegal cities on them in the Negev, all of these things are issues of law enforcement. And to the extent that we need to reform our legal system, in whatever way we need to reform it in order to enable our elected officials and our appointed government officials to enforce Israeli law. That's what we have to do. Look, I think that, again, a lot of the problem here is that we're not having a policy discussion. We have not had a serious policy discussion about how to govern this country for at least a generation. We have a conversation about what's the scariest thing you can think of? I can think of something even scarier. Well, let me go with my view because I'm even scarier than you are, and I'm going to go and I'm going to tell you what else is scary. That is not a policy debate. A policy debate is, look, we have facts, we have data. These are the data, this is what the data is telling us about demography, about law enforcement, about whatever it happens to be, about our international standing. Let's have a discussion about how we find answers to these problems. I think when we put aside our fear and we just start having rational, fact-based, data-based, and driven discussions, we find that our problems are not insolvable, they're eminently solvable.
אני מתנצל שזמננו תם. מודה לקהל על הקשב ועל ההשתתפות ותודה למשתתפי הפאנל. תודה רבה.